Blood was running down the side of his face, dripping onto the collar of his shirt, when the officer holding his wallet finally froze. He looked at the ID one more time, then looked up at the man he had slammed against the car. His lips parted, and all he could whisper was, "Oh my God." That man, bleeding, handcuffed, but standing steady, was not just another driver pulled over for looking suspicious. He was Dr. Elijah Carter, the brand new head of internal affairs for the Crestview Police Department. And in that moment, every cop on that dark street realized they had just destroyed their own careers. But to understand how Elijah ended up here, cuffed, bleeding, and staring at a squad of officers who thought they had all the power, you've got to rewind a bit. Earlier that same morning, the sun had streamed through the blinds of a small corner office downtown. Elijah straightened the photos of his wife and son on his new desk, still not quite believing it was his. 53 years old, gray flecks in his beard, the kind of man who carried himself with quiet strength. He had just been promoted to the job. No one thought a black man in Crestview would ever get head of internal affairs. The appointment wasn't public yet. Official word wouldn't come for another week. But for Elijah, it already felt like the culmination of 26 years of grit. From a rookie patrolling the roughest beats, to a detective who outscored everyone on exams, to an inspector who wrote reports nobody could ignore. And yet he'd spent decades watching promotions go to people with half his record, overhearing jokes about his skin being told to wait his turn. He'd waited long enough. That night, after a quiet dinner with the commissioner and the mayor, where they laid out their biggest headache, the East Side District, notorious for racial profiling complaints, Elijah decided to take a drive, not in his city-issued car, just his 5-year-old Lexus sedan, the one with a squeaky windshield wiper. He wanted to see the neighborhood for himself before he launched an investigation. The streets were quiet, neon signs humming over shuttered shops. Elijah noticed the lack of investment, the cracked sidewalks, the hollowed-out buildings, things he'd seen all his life in neighborhoods like his. At 11:15 p.m., as he rolled up to a red light, he spotted a patrol car idling outside a convenience store. Inside, Sergeant Rick Briggs, a square-jawed veteran with a reputation for cleaning up the streets, grumbled about his stop numbers to his younger partner, Kowalski. Then Briggs spotted Elijah's Lexus, a black man alone in a decent car driving through East Side at night. Perfect target. Blue lights lit up behind him. Elijah wasn't surprised. He pulled smoothly to the curb, turned off the engine, placed his hands at 10 and 2. He'd lived this scene before, both as a civilian and as an officer who had investigated complaints. But tonight he decided to see exactly how far Briggs would go. License and registration. Briggs barked, shining a flashlight directly into his eyes. "Good evening, officer," Elijah said calmly. "May I ask why I'm being stopped? License and registration first." "I'll tell you when I'm good and ready." Elijah narrated his every move, glove box, wallet, documents, because in America, that's what survival often looks like when you're black. He handed them over, steady hands, steady voice. Briggs smirked at the name. "Dr. Elijah Carter. What kind of doctor are you?" "Basketball didn't work out." "I have a PhD in criminal justice," Elijah replied, his jaw tightening. "And I'd still like to know why I was pulled over." "You were swerving. Suspected DUI," Briggs lied. Elijah looked him straight in the eye. "I haven't had a drop to drink. My driving's been careful and lawful." Briggs leaned closer, venom in his voice. "Are you calling me a liar, boy?" The word hung in the air like poison. Elijah's pulse quickened, but he didn't flinch. "I'm asking to be treated with respect, officer." "Sir will do. Or Dr. Carter." That's when Briggs yanked him from the car, slammed him against the doorframe hard enough to split his temple. Blood ran hot down his cheek as handcuffs bit into his wrists. Resisting arrest, Briggs muttered into his radio, spinning a story for backup. Within minutes, 4 more officers arrived. Not one of them asked Elijah for his side. Not one questioned Briggs. They searched his car without consent, rifled through his phone, tightened his cuffs until his hands went numb. And all Elijah did was watch, memorizing every violation, every racist dig, every ounce of unnecessary force. Finally, one rookie officer flipped open Elijah's wallet and pulled out an extra ID card. He squinted at it, confused. Briggs snatched it back with a sneer, probably fake. But Elijah's voice cut through the chaos, calm, deliberate. "Read it again. Carefully." When the rookie did, his face drained of color. The words glared back at him. "Elijah Carter, head of Internal Affairs, Crestview Police Department." Oh, shit, the rookie whispered. The air shifted instantly. Officers who'd been puffed up with arrogance were suddenly pale stiff, stepping back like the ground had dropped out from under them. Briggs tried to bluster. This has to be fake, but his voice cracked. Elijah stood taller despite the blood dripping down his collar. It's authentic. And every second of this stop has been recorded. Body cams can go dark. Dash cams can malfunction. But my device doesn't miss a thing. Every slur, every illegal search, every abuse of force, it's all there. The silence was deafening. Remove these cuffs, he ordered. Now. Hands shook as the rookie fumbled with the keys. Elijah rubbed his raw wrist, then turned back to Briggs. Sergeant, I'll need your weapon and badge. Pending investigation. Briggs stared frozen. For the first time in 20 years, he wasn't in control. 15 minutes later, Captain Wallace screeched onto the scene, horror on his face as he realized who stood bleeding under the glow of his patrol lights. He tried to smooth it over, but Elijah cut him cold. This wasn't an inspection. Captain, this was a routine drive home until your officers profiled and assaulted me. What happened tonight happens to citizens in this community every single day. The difference is I have the power to hold them accountable. That night was just the beginning. The following weeks unraveled everything Briggs and his crew thought was untouchable. Testimonies poured in, patterns emerged, thousands of stops, almost all targeting minorities, barely any real charges. Falsified reports, missing evidence, intimidation of witnesses. It wasn't a few bad apples. It was a culture, and Elijah was dragging it all into the light. But power never gives up easy. His wife got threatening calls at the hospital where she worked. His son, a law student, was pulled over and told to remind his daddy to back off. One cooperating officer was beaten nearly to death in his apartment. Files disappeared. Evidence was corrupted. The mayor himself hinted Elijah should focus on reforms instead of punishment. And then came the breaking point, his home ransacked, final warning spray-painted on the wall. That's when Elijah stopped playing by their timetable. With help from an FBI agent who had been circling the case, he set a trap. He leaked word he might be willing to settle. The bait worked. Briggs Deputy Chief Harrison, and a city official with ties to East Side real estate, showed up at an abandoned warehouse, smug, certain they had him cornered. They didn't know the FBI had wired the place with cameras and mics. Elijah sat at that table, bandaged but unbowed, as Briggs bragged about keeping the neighborhoods in line. Harrison called the corruption necessary realities, and the city's officials spelled it out. You walk away, we all keep making money, and your family stays safe. Every word recorded, every threat documented. By dawn, coordinated raids swept the city. Harrison in cuffs. Briggs dragged out of a bar. Councilmen, cops, even the mayor's own brother hauled into federal custody. 17 officers, multiple officials, all facing charges that would end their careers and put some behind bars for decades. And Elijah, he didn't stop there. At public hearings, he laid out reforms, mandatory cameras that couldn't be shut off, civilian oversight with real power, diversity, and hiring. Within 6 months, complaints dropped by more than half. Trust, slow and fragile, began to grow again. One evening, almost a year later, Elijah drove through East Side once more. Same streets, same cracked sidewalks, but a different air. At a stoplight, a young patrol officer pulled up beside him, rolled down her window, and offered a respectful nod. No flashlight in his face, no suspicion, just respect. The light turned green. They both drove on. Same city, but not the same. Now here's the thing, Elijah could have revealed his identity the moment Briggs pulled him over, avoided the blood, the humiliation, the risk. But he didn't. He chose to endure what countless others had endured, to see it raw and unfiltered, and to gather the proof no one could ignore. And it worked, but it also cost him. So let me ask you, was he right to play it that way? To bleed for proof, or should he have pulled rank from the start, spared himself and his family the trauma? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this isn't just his story, it's America's story. Where do you stand on it? If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share this with someone who still thinks profiling is just doing their job. Because sometimes the most powerful act of resistance is simply refusing to accept injustice as normal.